In a quiet mountain town, there lived a blacksmith named Riku. His work was admired far and wide. Blades so sharp they could split a falling leaf, horseshoes that never wore out. People traveled days just to buy from him, but what they didn't see was the cost behind every swing of his hammer. Riku would rise before dawn, his body aching from the day before, hands blistered, breath tight. He never complained. He believed that greatness required pain, and for years he wore that belief like armor. One day, a young apprentice named Toma arrived at his forge. "I want to be like you," the boy said. Riku looked at him, saw fire in his eyes, but also softness in his hands. He said nothing. Instead, he handed Toma a hammer, heavier than it looked. "Then begin." And so the boy did. What followed wasn't triumph. It was silence, repetition, and the slow realization that mastery demands more than talent. It demands sacrifice. Days turned into weeks. Toma's hands bled. His arms trembled with each strike. He expected applause, but the forge offered only heat and echo. "When do I get to make a sword, Wu?" he asked one evening, sweat dripping from his brow. Riku didn't answer. He simply pointed to a pile of twisted metal, a graveyard of failed attempts. "That's where all swords begin," he said. The boy stared, disheartened. "They all broke?" Riku nodded. "And so will yours, until they don't." Toma lowered his head. "I thought it would feel better, being on the path." Riku looked at him sharply. "The path doesn't feel good. It feels honest." Silence settled between them. Outside, the village celebrated a festival. Laughter floated through the air, but inside the forge it was just them, metal, fire, and the truth. Toma didn't smile. He just picked up the hammer again. Somewhere deep inside, he knew comfort would never forge greatness. One morning, Riku asked Toma to follow him up the hill behind the village. They walked in silence until they reached a flat stone where an old anvil sat cracked and rusting. "This was my first," Riku said, brushing dust from its surface. "I trained here for years, failing more than I can count." Toma looked surprised. "You failed?" Riku smiled faintly. "Every master begins as a fool with a tool too heavy." He picked up a shard of metal beside the anvil and handed it to Toma. "I kept this to remind myself. Success isn't built in silence. It screams through every scar." Toma turned the shard in his hand. It was bent, imperfect, but somehow it felt earned. "No one talks about this part," he said. Riku nodded. "Because it's not inspiring. It's real." As they stood there, wind cutting through the quiet, Toma finally understood. There is a price to becoming someone worth remembering. If you're chasing something big, subscribe and hit the bell. The truth behind success is rarely told, but always earned. Back at the forge, days grew colder. Toma's arms grew stronger, but his spirit dimmed. He had expected progress to feel like elevation. Instead, it felt like weight. He worked while others slept, ate less, spoke less. One night, as he struggled to mold a blade that refused to take shape, He slammed the metal against the anvil and shouted, "Why does it never work?" Riku didn't flinch. He walked over, picked up the warped blade, and said, "Because it's not time." Toma stared, confused. "But I've done everything right." Riku nodded. "And still, it's not time. Effort doesn't guarantee reward. Only readiness does." Toma sat down, breath shallow. The heat had faded. "How do I know when I'm ready?" Riku looked him in the eyes. "When you stop asking if you are." Silence again. The boy didn't argue. He simply stood, grabbed a fresh piece of steel, and began again, without expectation but not without purpose. Weeks later, the blade finally held its shape. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't crack. Riku examined it under the morning sun, then handed it back. "Again," he said. Toma blinked. "Again?" Riku nodded. "One blade doesn't make a blacksmith. Repetition does." Toma's grip tightened on the handle. He had poured everything into this one, and now he had to start over. There was no celebration, no praise, just the quiet rhythm of purpose continuing. That night, as Toma cleaned the forge alone, he found an old scroll tucked beneath a shelf. On it were Riku's early designs, clumsy, uneven, full of errors. He smiled. The great blacksmith had once been lost in the process, too. He rolled the scroll and placed it back where he found it. He understood now. The path doesn't end with one victory. It deepens, and in that depth there is something more enduring than praise. There is transformation. The seasons changed, snow fell. Toma stayed. He no longer counted the days or cursed the burns on his hands. One evening, while sharpening a new blade, Riku stood beside him in silence. "You're not the same boy who walked in here," he said. Toma kept working. "I know." Riku placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then leave." Toma looked up, startled. "Leave?" Riku nodded. "You've paid the price. Now go live what you've earned." The forge felt heavier than ever before, not from metal but from meaning. Toma packed only what he needed: his tools, a blade, and a quiet knowing. As he walked out, Riku called to him, "Remember, people will see the shine, but only you will know the cost." Toma didn't look back. He didn't need to. The fire inside him no longer burned for approval. It burned for mastery, and with every step away from the forge, he carried its heat with him. Toma journeyed from village to village, offering blades not just forged, but lived. People praised his work, but none guessed what it had cost. One evening a nobleman asked, "How long did it take to master this craft?" Toma paused. "It's still taking." The noble laughed, thinking it modesty. But Toma meant every word. Late that night he sat by a fire alone, blade across his lap. He traced the hilt with his thumb, not admiring the beauty, but remembering the burns. Mastery hadn't come with applause. It had come with sacrifice, silence, and stubbornness, the things no one posts about. The next morning, a young girl approached him. "Did you always know you'd be great?" Toma smiled gently. "No," he said. "I only knew I wouldn't quit." She nodded like she understood. Maybe one day she would, and maybe she too would discover that success isn't given. It's built quietly, painfully, one scar at a time. Years passed. Toma's name became legend. But those who truly listened to his story didn't ask how he did it. They asked why he kept going when it was easier to stop. In a quiet village, now far from where he started, he built a small forge of his own. Not grand, not flashy, just honest. People came not only for the blades, but for the silence that surrounded them. It carried a weight they couldn't name. One day, an apprentice arrived, eyes full of fire, hands still clean. "I want to be like you," he said. Toma handed him a hammer. "Then begin." The boy hesitated. "Will it hurt?" Toma looked at him carefully. "Yes," he replied, "and it will be worth it." As the forge lit once more, Toma sat nearby, watching the flames dance. Not because they were beautiful, but because he knew what they cost. And now the question is yours to carry. Do you want the reward, or are you willing to pay the price